You see a shirt marked down from $80 to $32. You didn't need a shirt. You weren't even looking for one. But that number, 80, crossed out in thin gray text, makes 32 feel less like a purchase and more like a rescue. Why does a price you never actually paid still control how good a deal feels? The answer is one of the most well-documented effects in behavioral economics, and once you see it, you'll notice it running underneath nearly every sale you've ever walked away from feeling like you won. In 1974, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky ran an experiment that had nothing to do with shopping. They asked participants to spin a wheel rigged to land on either a low number or a high number, then asked an unrelated question: what percentage of United Nations countries are African nations? People who spun a low number guessed low. People who spun a high number guessed high. The wheel had zero connection to the actual answer, but once a number entered someone's mind, their brain quietly used it as a starting point, adjusting only slightly from wherever that first number happened to land. Kahneman and Tversky called this anchoring, and it became one of the most reliable, most replicated findings in the entire field. Does that sound familiar? Now put a price tag in place of that spinning wheel. The moment you see $80 crossed out, your brain has an anchor. It doesn't matter that you never paid $80, and it doesn't matter that the shirt may never have reliably sold at that price to begin with. The number entered your mind first, and everything after it gets measured against that anchor instead of against a neutral question like, what is this shirt actually worth to me? Marketing researchers, including work building on Kahneman and Tversky's original findings, refer to this in retail specifically as the reference price effect. Retailers don't just set a price. They set two prices, whether or not the first one was ever real in practice, because the contrast between them is what actually drives the purchase decision, far more than the final number on its own. Here's where it gets more consequential. This isn't a minor quirk that only affects clearance racks. In the past several years, regulators, including the United States Federal Trade Commission, have taken action against retailers for advertising fake original prices, inflated reference numbers that were rarely, if ever, the actual price customers paid before the sale began. The anchor wasn't just psychologically persuasive. In some documented cases, it was manufactured specifically to be persuasive, with no real prior price behind it at all. So why does this work so consistently, even on people who know, intellectually, that sales are designed to sell them things? Because anchoring doesn't operate through conscious reasoning. It operates upstream of it. You don't consciously decide to use the crossed-out price as your reference point. Your brain does it automatically, the same way Kahneman and Tversky's participants automatically leaned on a random spin of a wheel to answer a question about geography. Knowing about the bias intellectually and feeling its effect are two completely different things, which is exactly why sophisticated shoppers still fall for it constantly. There's a second layer worth understanding, one that compounds the first. Once an anchor is set, your brain doesn't just use it to judge the price. It uses it to judge whether buying at all was the right decision, retroactively. If the shirt is $32 and the anchor was $80, not buying it can start to feel like leaving money on the table, even though the only money genuinely at stake is the $32 leaving your account right now for an item you didn't want 20 minutes ago. This connects to something we've talked about before, loss aversion. The finding that losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. A sale reframes not buying as a loss. You're not simply choosing whether to spend $32. Your brain is quietly framing the decision as whether to lose out on $48 of savings, and losses, even hypothetical ones you never actually had, are what your brain is wired to avoid most aggressively. Put those two mechanisms together, and you get something powerful. An anchor that was possibly never even real, combined with a loss aversion response to walking away from it. And the result is a purchase that feels rational and even prudent in the moment, regardless of whether the item was ever something you needed. So what actually helps once you understand this? First, mentally delete the crossed-out number entirely before evaluating a purchase. Ask only, would I pay this exact final price for this exact item if there had never been a higher number shown to me at all? That single reframing removes the anchor's power almost completely, because it forces your brain to evaluate the actual number instead of the gap between two numbers. Second, notice the specific feeling of missing out on savings and treat it as a signal rather than a fact. That feeling is loss aversion responding to an anchor, not evidence that a real financial opportunity is slipping away. The money you'd save doesn't exist unless you were already planning to buy the item at full price in the first place. Third, remember that a reference price is a claim, not a fact, and in some documented cases, an entirely fabricated one. A sale price only genuinely means something if the original price was genuinely real and genuinely paid by real customers before the discount began. You saw a shirt marked down from $80 to $32. You didn't need a shirt. But now you know exactly which number was doing the convincing, and it wasn't the one you actually paid.